So hi everyone, welcome to part 2 of Ramadan in a New Country. This is for UCC churches that are currently hosting Afghan refugees or other types of refugees that come from the Middle East and Africa, or really anywhere else in the world in which this information may be useful at this time. As we covered last week, Ramadan is the most holy month in the Islamic calendar, and it starts in about a month. It'll start approximately April 2nd. And the reason why I say approximately is, again, as a review, it begins with the next crescent moon, but probably around April 2nd. You're going to be witnessing a lot of behavioral changes in the families that you're hosting. If you'd like to learn more about what exactly those behavioral changes will look like, that's covered in the first video, which was recorded. And so if you would like to see that recording, you can go ahead and just, again, email me. I'm going to go ahead and drop my email in the chat for anyone who doesn't have it. And I will get you that recording and also copies of the DVD if you would like it. So this week we're going by gauging the questions from last week. We're going to go ahead and cover women in Islam mostly today, and then a little bit about what stuff to get to prepare for Ramadan or help your family feel more comfortable in terms of what they have in their home and their community to make this time sacred for them and comfortable. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a PowerPoint presentation for you. There it is. Okay, so as we covered a little bit last week, the idea behind women in particular in Islam is it kind of takes on this separate but equal quality in that both men and women are expected to be fully contributing members of society, but their roles are different. And I will go into why that is. There are very exact standards of why the roles are separate but equal. A woman is considered to do traditional roles like mothering, taking care of a household, taking care of family finances, and things like that. Those are her primary roles, while a man's primary role is to be the breadwinner and make sure his family is provided for. These things are outlined in the Quran and then the various other scriptures that Muslims use to act as a gauge of their faith. That doesn't mean that women can't work and women can't own businesses and women can't do anything else that they enjoy. It's just as long as they're accomplishing their primary responsibility of being wives, mothers, and home carers, then they are free to become fully whatever else they have a passion to be. And the same goes for men. There's the same responsibility expected of men, is that their primary responsibility is to take care of their family, and everything else comes second. Most of this information about women and their role in public life, family life, and in relationship to God is from the 4th chapter of the Quran. It's called Surat al-Nisa, which means the chapter of the women. It's all about women and how you treat them and how and the expectations that they have of their life in relationship with God. Now, it's also important to note that both men and women in Islam are considered to be equal in relationship to God. A woman is expected to pray in the same way that a man does, and has equal status under God. However, women cannot become imams or sheikhs, which is the equivalent to a priest in Islam. That isn't their standing in the faith. Their standing in the faith is to create a godly family space for their family and a good example. And we'll go over Surat al-Nisa, which is the 4th chapter of the Quran, in a little bit as well. There are several prophets in Islam, as I said in the last video, is that all the prophets that we have from the Bible are replicated in the Quran, although somewhat differently, in that the prophets we see in the Bible are imperfect human beings that are changed by God, whereas in the Quran, there are perfect exemplars of how to be a good person. So, for example, you see Moses in the Quran as well as the Bible, except Moses is not a murderer in the Quran. Um, the only woman that is named in the Quran is Mary, mother of Jesus. There's a whole chapter about her and her piety and giving birth to Jesus. And again, that will be covered a little bit more in this. But she is the only female that is named in the Quran. And I can also explain more about the reasoning behind that, why all the prophets are men, and the basic idea behind that. And really, all of this is the protection of the woman. That is very central to Islam, is the protection of the woman. In not just protecting them from worldly evils or anything like that, but also protecting them from being skewed in the wrong way. So you'll see in these videos I show you, it always starts out by saying, Muslims do not show images of any of the prophets. And the reason for that is to protect the prophets. They think that if you project an image, and I don't disagree with this, if you project an image of someone, then it skews the watcher or listener's idea of who that person is supposed to be. For example, we see lots of images of Jesus as white within the church, and Jesus was most certainly not white. So the Quran corrects that both about its prophets and about women in public life, is that if you don't overexpose a person, then you're free to make intellectual and heart judgments about that person rather than physical appearance judgments. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and give you an 8-minute segment from the next part of this documentary. It's a 4-part documentary, or 5. It might have 5 videos, and so I'm just selecting segments from it. And this segment is from Islam and women. So let me go ahead and stop screen sharing and pull that up for you so you can hear directly from Muslims themselves, their view of women in their faith. Hold on a second, let me just find it in my tabs here. Where is it? My apologies, I'm having trouble finding it. Hold on one moment. Okay, this may take me a second. That's weird. There we are. Whoops, and it started over. I wanted to start it from... Right. There. Can you guys all see that? Or no? Yeah, you can? No, I can't see it. I'm sorry. Having some technical difficulties over here. Okay, so, whoops. I will get it, I promise. Hold on. Why doesn't it show up? Well, while I'm pulling this up, does anyone have any questions so far? Okay. Okay, I'm trying again. Okay, so if I do it this way, I can't see you. I can only see the screen. So can you see it and can you hear it if I play it? Can someone tell me out loud?
No, we can't see it.
You can't
No.
see it or hear it. Oh,
All we can see is the list of various clips that you have.
yeah. I don't know why it's doing this to me.
What happens if you start the video and then share your screen?
Then I can't get back to the screen. So it worked just fine last week.
I feel your pain.
Like I said, we just don't study this in seminary, so
I've been there.
maybe if I tried closing some tabs, it'd be easier to find it. How about I do that? So I'm just going to close all the other stuff I got open, which is too much stuff. Try that. Okay, I'm going to try it this way. See if this works. Okay, how about now? Can you guys all see this?
It started. Oh, there it is.
Okay, cool. So let me pull it to where I wanted it to be. Now you can see it. We're getting progress. I want it about right here. And then I'm going to press play, and if you guys could tell me if you could hear it, that'd be awesome.
And they were asked to come forth and give their
Hear it?
opinions. And I think today women are still doing the same thing.
Yes.
The rights and equal status given to women by Muhammad resulted in an unprecedented growth in the contributions of women in society.
Women do have the right to own property and to earn a living in Islam. Those were rights that were given to women over 1400 years ago, where it was unheard of in the West.
The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, gave women that opportunity to be active politically. He gave them rights through God's command.
In contemporary terms, we would call Prophet Muhammad a dedicated women's rights advocate. When he migrated to the city of Medina, Muhammad established the first Muslim city-state and ensured that all its citizens had equal rights, regardless of their gender.
The marketplace in Medina, the city of the Prophet, was sometimes under the direction of a woman. Even in the days of the Caliphate, the rule that came after the Prophet, marketplaces were sometimes put under the authorization and the direction of women, which not only tells you the importance of women, but it also shows you that there were lots of women in the marketplace.
Islam honors many women, and the Quran reveres one woman in particular. Muslim women look up to Mary, the mother of Jesus, as a great role model, a symbol of piety, of submission to God, of chastity and purity. Significantly, a chapter of the Muslims' holy book, the Quran, is named after Mary. The Quran speaks of Mary in the following terms.
The angel said, O Mary, God has chosen you and purified you and chosen you above all the women of all nations. O Mary, God gives you good news of a word from him whose name is the Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary, honored in this world and in the hereafter, and one of those brought near to God. He shall speak to the people in infancy and in old age, and shall be of the righteous. She said, "O my Lord, how shall I have a son when no man has touched me?" He said, "Even so, God creates what he wills. When he decrees a thing, he says to it, 'Be,' and it is."
Mary's story is an empowering example for Muslim women. She was a woman devoted to God who had to strive against great difficulties in order to carry out the great responsibility God assigned her with. It is this strength of character in Mary that is admired by Muslim women, as well as her piety and modesty. In fact, if you will notice, the Virgin Mary is always depicted in modest attire with her hair covered with a scarf or piece of fabric, what a Muslim might call a hijab.
Muslim women in Islam wear a head covering or a special type of dress. So it's more than just covering your hair. It's a code of conduct as well. And this symbolizes our religion. It symbolizes the honor that a woman has. It also symbolizes her status. It's a protection.
Hijab is a modest appearance. For a Muslim woman, hijab can come in many different forms. It is modesty in clothing in a way that I think the focus is on inside, on intelligence, on personality and character, and not on outward beauty that is something we can't control necessarily.
Modesty, as an Islamic concept, applies to both men and women. The Quran clearly commands men and women to lower their gaze, to be modest, to guard their chastity.
I knew that in this religion, modesty is part of it. And that's one of the things, another one of the reasons why I chose to become Muslim, is because before 14, I was living a life where I guess appearance meant a lot. And I was thrown into a lot of modeling competitions. And there would be times when I'd be walking on a runway up and down, and these men would just be looking at me with a judgmental eye, measuring your measurements like you're an object. And I don't feel that anyone should ever be treated that way. And I don't feel that women should put themselves in that situation, because it's degrading and it's demonizing, and I don't see any freedom in a situation like that. The ultimate freedom for me was wearing the hijab, and it made me become my own person. It made other people view me by my intellect and by my heart and what I had to say and who I was as a person. And I think that was the most enlightening thing that could have ever happened to me.
A common misconception is that Islam compels Muslim women to dress the way they do. Muslim women and men have the freedom to live their lives as they please. Freedom of conscience is central to Islam. There can be no compulsion in religion.
I never felt like my being Muslim could stop me from doing anything I wanted to do, such as playing sports, going outdoors, going shopping, driving a car, anything like that.
There are other roles for women laid out in Islam. Marriage, motherhood, education, and being an active participant in society are all roles discussed in Islam. The Islamic marriage is a sacred contract between a willing woman and a willing man. There can be no coercion. In other words, women cannot be forced to marry against their will. In addition to this protection of rights, the bride has the right to include in the marriage contract any conditions she feels necessary as a means of protecting her rights.
In Islam, a woman does have the right to choose who she's going to marry. It's very important for her to be part of that choice because ultimately she's the one who's going to be living with that person and enjoying life with that person. When a woman gets married, she gets something called the mahr, or a marital gift from her husband, and nobody is allowed to touch that. Her father doesn't get it, her husband doesn't get it, nobody is allowed to touch that money, and that is solely hers, and she can invest it. She can invest it in property, she can invest it in businesses, she can use it for whichever, as an nest egg even, and that's something that she's always had a right to have.
Motherhood is another important role for women in Islam. Having children, educating and raising them as good human beings is the responsibility of both parents.
As a mother, in my role, I see myself, my primary role is to ensure that my child or my children understand Islamic codes in terms of their belief. They understand who they are, they're educated, and they understand who we are, what our role is, where we come from, and where we're going. And that this life is only temporal, you know, and that there's a hereafter. I think these are the most important things for me to instill, you know, in my children.
Okay, so as I said, I can send it to you. Please just email me. That's the best way for me to be able to see the request, and we'll have it sent right out to you. All right, I'm going to go back into my PowerPoint presentation now. So I can find that easier this time. There it is. Sorry, my daughter's upstairs. I don't know if that's very loud for you. So as I said, all of this stuff is based on the Surat al-Nisa, which is called the chapter of the women, and it outlines exactly what a woman's role is and what her rights are. And actually, for the time that this was written, it was extremely revolutionary to give women any rights at all. In the ancient Mid-East and elsewhere in Africa, it was more common for a woman to have to give a dowry in order to get married, give a gift to her husband rather than the other way around. So Islam was the first religion, the first cultural habit in which the woman received something, which is called the mahar, which is like marital life insurance. And there's also a contract, a Sharia contract, in which the woman can outline exactly what she wants for her husband in cases of X, Y, and Z. So if the husband wants multiple wives, which he is entitled to do, she can write in her marriage contract that if he takes on a second wife, she gets a divorce and $50,000, or whatever it is that she wants to put in there before the marriage. It's this prenuptial situation that every woman gets, so she can lay out her own rules about how she wants to be married. And that, again, that was really revolutionary for the time. Even now, it's when you get a divorce in the Middle East, everything's already been outlined, and a woman can divorce her husband. She can be the instigator of that, and she just automatically gets what's in the terms of the mahar contract, the Sharia contract. So I pulled out a couple quotes from Surat al-Nisa to give you a perspective of what the whole chapter is like. You're welcome to look up the Quran in English and read the whole thing yourself, but the whole thing's about women. The first quote might not seem like it's about women too, but I'll explain why I pulled that. It says, "O you who believe, stand firmly for justice as witnesses to Allah, even if it be against yourselves or your parents or your relatives, and whether it be against rich or poor, for Allah is nearer to both that you are. Follow not the lusts of your heart, and if you distort justice or lapse or fall away, then indeed Allah is well informed of all that you do." And the reason why I pull that one is because this is one of the major quotes of Islam. This, you know, how we in Christianity have quotes that we pull from, like John 3:16 or 1 Corinthians 1:13. We have star quotes too. This is one of theirs. And the reason for that is because when they talk about all these relational things and rules that are in Islam, it's all for the sake of every human being to be closer to God. And so the rules are in place, the expectations and the behaviors are in place so that every person can focus on God. And so that's why this is central, even that doesn't technically have very much to do with women. So these other quotes are the nuts and bolts, right? Because the Quran has loads of nuts and bolts. You know, for example, if you decide to marry more than one wife, you're allowed to have up to 4 if you're a man, but they have to be women that are in need. So in the ancient world in general, a woman's job was to be a wife. And if she didn't have a husband, she was a beggar. She was destitute. Yeah, that's been true up until just like 50 years ago for most of the Western world. But so the purpose of having multiple wives in Islam was if you met a widow or a girl that was coming to age that had been orphaned, or you know, a woman who is disabled or otherwise, that is who you could take as a second, third, or fourth wife, is a woman who needs the employment of being a wife, but you don't just do it because you feel like having multiple wives. That's not the purpose of it. And so again, it's for the protection of women, was the understanding of having multiple wives. Does that always happen in practice when Muslim men take multiple wives? No, but are any of us perfect at practicing our faiths? Questionable, right? And then there's another quote about the mahar, the marital gift. Like I said, that was revolutionary, that the woman gets a gift, the woman gets an investment, some life insurance rather than the other way around. That had never been true in the ancient world before. And then another quote about inheritance. So in the Quran, in Islam, when a mother and father die, their inheritance goes equally between their sons and half to their daughters. And the purpose of that is because the sons are expected to financially take care of their future wives, and the women are not, right? So the financial inheritance goes mainly to the sons so that they are able to take care of their future wives. And for the women, it's just a cool bonus gift. So it's, at that time, it was meant to be revolutionary that women get any part of the inheritance at all. And so those are just a couple quotes I pulled from Surat al-Nisa in order to give you some framework about what that chapter looks like. It is very nuts and bolts. It is very transactional. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and skip to this slide and come back to talk about that transactional nature. Islam in general is extremely transactional, disciplined, clear. You know, I think, in my opinion, every religion has its center point. You know, maybe in Judaism, it's the community. And in Christianity, it's transformation, it's salvation. But for Islam, it's discipline. So this is an entire book of ethical code of conduct between human beings so that they can be closer to God. So it's very regimented, it's very transactional. Again, they have these marriage contracts that they put together that involve business exchange and so forth. You see some of this in the Old Testament in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. I think there's a lot of very similar comparisons between Judaism and Islam, more so than Christianity in a lot of ways. But, you know, they did that because Muslims pride themselves on the Quran and the religion not being ambiguous, that it is all cut and dry. There's no argument about it. It's written right there that these are the expectations of your behavior. These are the expectations of mine. Again, is this done correctly in practice all the time? Not always, right? But human beings are human beings. Islam did, as I said in the last video, have one of the longest standing and most successful and thriving empires in the history of humankind, the Ottoman Empire. And so they were able to make it work for a long time. I would argue that the breakdown of culture that's happening right now among Islamic countries actually has to do with the colonization of the Middle East and Africa over the beginning of the last century, and the breakdown of culture and the isolation of it. But that's a conversation for another time, and I can answer questions about that as well. In comparison to our own Christianity, I mean, Christianity is a very energetic religion. It's apocalyptic. If you read the New Testament, a lot of what Jesus says is about the end of the world, right? A lot of, especially in like the book of Mark, they thought the world was ending right then. They had no need to make all these rules about society because they said, you got to get right with God because the world's ending right now. And so Christianity takes on this sort of more spirited, transformational nature of changing oneself, empowering oneself into newness. And that just isn't present in the Quran, not in the same way. It's not present in Islam in the same way. Islam is more transactional, it's more disciplined, it's more regimented. And again, the Bible is not as concrete as the Quran is. It's got mixed reviews over the roles of women. You see Paul putting women in preaching roles throughout his churches, and he also says that they're not supposed to speak in church. You know, the Bible is a story of people becoming and growing and learning. The Quran is not that story. It's the story of how to become perfect. And again, I can answer questions about that if you have any. But yeah, so what you see about what's written in women in the roles that you see in the households that you're serving, when you walk into a household, they're playing along with transactional roles. They're not playing wrong, that's the wrong language. They are living into transactional roles that are outlined for them by the Quran. So one author that tends to go against what mainstream Islam mostly practices and teaches is Amina Wadud. She calls herself the Lady Imam. She's the only Imam that's female. She is not very well received, to be honest, across most of Islam. But she did write a lot of literature about the Quran and women and reading it from a woman's perspective, because again, a woman can't be an imam. So she said she was going to read it and interpret it and write about it anyway. And so she affirms that there is gender equality in the Quran, because there technically is, they're just different roles. And she argues that actually Islam was super revolutionary and that it gave women rights at a time when they had absolutely none, which is accurate. And Amina Wadud is a practicing Muslim. She also is very active on Instagram and Facebook. So if you want to follow her, you can learn more of her wisdom or just read her book. But like I said, most Muslims that I know don't take Amina Wadud very seriously, but her writing is very interesting about women nonetheless. Also, I want to mention the Surah Al-Nisa, it does talk about the hijab, the head covering, and how that is, it specifically says that a woman should wear a veil over her chest for modesty. The head covering bit just kind of came out of cultural habit of covering your head because the Middle East is super hot. So we have it today. So there's a lot of disagreement over what a proper hijab is supposed to look like. But again, the purpose of that, as one woman I think said very eloquently in the video, is if you can't see a woman's beauty, then all you can see is her intelligence and her heart. And that is the main purpose to them, is to protect a woman's integrity. And it's not compulsory. They don't have to do that. And sort of last note I want to make about women is that it's okay to not to understand. You know, it's okay not to understand everything about the way that they do what they do, and to not necessarily agree with it. You know, you can make your own judgments based on discernment and knowledge on whether what you're witnessing is abuse or it's culture. You know, for example, the Surah Al-Nisa, it does say that a man can hit a woman if she is not listening. There is a passage about that, which is a very controversial passage. But anyway, it's okay not to understand, and it's okay to have different values than the people that you're hosting. You know, just because culture doesn't look or act like you, it doesn't mean that they're not valuable by God and that they're not valuable to live, to have survived the experience they went through. So I just wanted to read you some scripture about being okay with not understanding. So this is from Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 through 6. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. This is the word of God. So I go back to that scripture when I think I need to fix this, or I need to change this, or this makes me anxious. Is remember why you're doing what you're doing, and that is to transform and empower lives, not fix or change a different culture, right? So that's just what I want to leave you with women. It's okay not to understand all of it. Okay. So the next part that I'm moving into is stuff. So why don't I go ahead and break right here, and you guys can go, so that we don't lose track of that thought pattern of women. And I'll let you guys ask questions if you need to about the first part of this presentation, because I know that there were a lot of questions last time. So I'm opening up to the floor.
One thing that I certainly noticed was that in the Quran, there's a whole lot of hell and damnation. I've read it, and it seemed like there was an awful lot of firm judgment. And it's also very clear that the Quran is written by one person, which certainly the Bible was not. How does that, I can't quite jive that with what you're telling me.
Well, I mean, the Bible has a lot about hell and damnation too. That's a consistent textual role, is the role of the day of judgment and the resurrection, right? They have that in Islam too. They also believe that Jesus will come back to judge the quick and the dead at the end of the time. That's also in the Quran. What do you mean it doesn't match up with what I'm saying? What could you elaborate?
Maybe you better go on. I'll put my question in the chat if it comes to me. Thanks.
Sure, no problem.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next section, which is stuff, right? Yeah, sort of a different topic, but in the same vein, is that most of the stuff that you'll have to get will be for the ladies. What basically they need is stuff to cook that is familiar to their culture. So the way that meals are served in the Middle East and Persia is with a large scale kitchen utensils. So really big pans. It's typical for a family to all eat off of the same pan. And sometimes on the ground, all around, instead of at a table where they have to be far apart and reach over. So they'll all sit around one big pan, which means that all the food was cooked in one big pot. So big pots and big pans are going to be really helpful to them, like really big, like 20 serving pan, which I know that you can't really find in Costco. So if you go to a halal store, they usually have those kinds of pans. If you go to a halal store, you're going to find the kind of kitchen utensils you need. They're large scale, these big pans and big pots. Also, easy cleanup supplies. Folks from Afghanistan are going to be very shocked. They probably won't tell you this, but they're going to be shocked about the way that we clean our houses. So in the Middle East and Persia, most houses are made of limestone or concrete. And the way that they clean up is they just spray water everywhere with some cleaning solution in it, and then they wipe everything away. It's very satisfying. So they're not going to understand really why you use a broom. They're going to think that's kind of dirty. And I don't really have a solution for that, because what they do with all that water is they have a hole in the floor that all the water goes through and takes all of the filth with it. And of course, we don't have that in our houses in the United States. Is a nice hole in the floor to clean up with. But having water-based cleaning supplies and bathroom supplies, for that matter, too, Muslims don't typically, on a different vein, Muslims typically don't use toilet paper. So having bathroom supplies and having kitchen supplies that are able to, get a good soapy lather to clean things up is going to be helpful for them being able to clean up in the way that they find culturally appropriate. Also having for iftar meals, again, iftar is the nightly dinner during or breakfast, I guess it would be during Ramadan. Having disposable utensils, if you're comfortable with that. I know that's not great for the environment, but after iftar is done, that woman is going to be expected to clean up, and she is going to have food shock from having just eaten after not doing it for 17 or 18 hours. And so having disposable utensils available if she decides that she's too tired to go clean all those dishes is going to be helpful to her. And again, large plastic sheeting. A family generally sits on the floor with a big dish in front of them, and they just roll up that sheet and throw it away. That's easy cleanup. They won't do that if you come to their house, because they aren't going to, they're going to act like your guests and have you seated at a table with your own bowls. But if they're alone, they're probably going to be wanting to sit on the floor together. Also teas and coffee sets. They're going to want to drink a lot of tea and coffee once they're able to break their fast. That's what they do for the rest of the night, is they sit around laughing and enjoying each other and drinking coffee and tea. And coffee and tea in the Middle East and Persia, of course, looks different than the kind of coffee and tea that we drink. Again, if you go into a halal store and you ask for a Persian or Arabic or Turkish coffee set or a tea set, they're gonna know what you're talking about, and you can find them there. In fact, if you just take the wife to a halal store and you say, here's $200, get the things you need, she'll be able to find what she needs. And that's an option you have and she might actually enjoy that, right? To get the stuff that they need. Now, they do a lot of baking during Ramadan, right? It passes the time during the day and it gives you an excellent treat at night. I don't really know what the classic baking stuff is for Afghanistan. I know in the Middle East it's called qatayef, which is really good. It's like fried pancakes with cream and nuts in it. So good. But so they do a lot of baking. So having baking utensils available is going to be welcomed. But if you do want to give them availability of extracts, do powders instead of extract, because extract has alcohol in it. They're not going to use it. And then for decorations, star, moon, and lantern decorations, there's a lantern. It's called a fanus. Like I said, the lantern kind of doesn't have any basis other than being like a light in the darkness, and they're cool looking. But the stars and the moon have to do, again, with the moon cycle of Ramadan. Prayer rugs, prayer clothing would be helpful. Again, you can find these probably at most halal stores or Arabic shops. Prayer clothing is especially important for the women. They wear what looks like pajamas, except it goes over their head. And then the men wear this long coat called a dishdash. And if they weren't able to bring those with them from Afghanistan because they fled really quickly, finding those things on Amazon or IslamicWardrobe.com or wherever would be a nice gift for them because they will be doing more prayer during Ramadan than they would normally. And then, of course, travel accessibility to the masjid. I said masjid because I just want you to know that Muslims don't call mosques mosques. They actually kind of find that word offensive, like a mosquito. They don't understand why we call it that. They call it a masjid. So if you want to talk to them about where they're going, if you say masjid, they're going to understand what you're saying, and they'll actually probably like that more. But also, if you're not comfortable throwing out a random word, if you say mosque, they're going to understand what you mean. But yeah, they're going to want to go to the mosque more often, probably, to pray and be with their community. So offering rides to the mosque might be helpful and welcomed for when they want to go break fast. The mosque also hosts lots of iftar dinners all through Ramadan. That wasn't necessarily true during the pandemic, but as we sort of reevaluate the guidelines from the CDC, I imagine that this year will be somewhat back to normal at least. Okay, so So the end of Ramadan is called Eid, and like I said, that is a day in which gifts are exchanged and people have a big party. I included this book cover from a book that I read my kids every year called "It's Ramadan, Curious George," and it goes through everything I just talked about, but for kids. So if you want a good kids book about Ramadan, that's a great one. I like it a lot. And again, that's tentatively on May 2, depends on the crescent moon. It's actually kind of exciting at the end of Ramadan because you're like, is today the last day or is tomorrow the last day? Oh, it's Eid, and then everyone goes and has a party right then. Like it's very spontaneous, and so they might spontaneously want to go to the masjid because suddenly it's a holiday, right? But of course, that's not your responsibility to be at the whim of if they're suddenly about to go to the masjid. I'm sure that they will figure that out. And then for Eid, a typical present is money, and women generally get $20 and a kid gets 5. But you know, if you're not comfortable handing out cash, that's fine. I would just have a conversation with the parents. Can I get your kids an Eid gift? If that's something you feel like walking with them in celebration for. So yeah, I mean that's basically it in terms of stuff around Ramadan, for what things you could get them that I could think of. And then of course next week, we did an overview of Ramadan, and then we talked about women and stuff. And then next week we're going to talk about Ramadan and Lent, and I'll be in conversation with the Minister for Ecumenical and Interfaith Ministries, Reverend Mark Pettis, who works with me at UCC National, and we're just going to be having a chat about how doing this work with our families informs our Lenten practices, and how it looks different, and what we could do to enrich our own spiritual well-being while we do this. And then, of course, the last week is going to be about racism in the refugee resettlement system and how it applies to Islamic refugees. So yeah,
both days.
I guess we have about 10 minutes left. So any questions?
Honestly, I'd rather do a hike Friday.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
I'm sorry. What did you say about toilet paper?
Eat dinner there. I mean, for
Yeah,
sure.
we'll go
Somebody
eat.
needs
I
to
think
mute.
someone has. I'm
Yeah.
just going to go ahead and start
At
muting
night?
folks.
At
Yeah,
night?
hold on one moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, Muslims keep toilet paper in their house for emergencies, but they think that our habit of using toilet paper in the bathroom is really gross. And they use water. They use a bidet, or I forgot what the little pour cup is called. But yeah, they use water in the bathroom, not toilet paper. So that's a nice feature to give them, but usually they just quietly get that thing by themselves, right? They're not going to ask you for alternative bathroom stuff. They understand that that we don't do it that way.
Could that be a plastic, like a white plastic pitcher with a, our family got some of those recently and we're very excited about them. I'm not sure if that might have been it.
Yep, that's probably what it's used for.
And coffee, I didn't understand about coffee.
Oh,
I didn't know. I know about tea. I don't know about coffee.
yeah. So I mean, you know, we have our coffee that we put through a filter in a machine, right? They have coffee that is extremely strong, that they use something called lost it, a brie. It's like this little thing where they put like very finely ground coffee into an abri, which goes on the stove, and then they stir it and stir it until it starts foaming up. It's more like it's like espresso. They basically drink espresso. Again, you can find all this stuff at an Islamic shop, but it's called Turkish coffee. They drink that more than they drink anything else.
Huh. Thank you.
And the cups are all very small, little tiny cups, like espresso. Big plates, little cups.
I think it's good to realize that the families might be different. Our family right away asked us for a coffee maker.
Really?
So yeah, So I think they were more middle upper class, and boy, they wanted all kinds of interesting things that we had never anticipated. I also have another question. My understanding is that they, during Ramadan, they eat a breakfast meal and a dinner meal. The breakfast meal would be done would be consumed before before sunrise, and the evening meal would be after sunrise.
Sunset.
I mean sunset. Yes.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean that's what our Iraqi friends do, and I didn't know if this was different because you didn't mention the two meals.
No, you're right. You're right. Sorry, I didn't mention that. The breakfast meal, which is the dinner meal, the breakfast meal is at night because you're breaking fast, right? And that's called iftar. That's at sunset, and then sahur is right before sunrise. And that's so all the folks wake up at 2 or 3 a.m. Of course, the women get up a little earlier so they can cook all this stuff, and they eat stuff that is very rich in protein. It'll be eggs and beans and hummus and falafel and fruit, stuff that's going to keep them hydrated and full throughout the day. So they're going to do that at 2 or 3 a.m. And then, the women go back to sleep and the men go to work. Typically, but of course everyone's different, as you said. I think it's really interesting they asked for an American coffee maker. That meal is called sahur, and it's usually at 2 or 3 a.m. And then the second that fajr happens, which is sunrise, then they'll all have an app on their phone. They'll start singing to them. They have to stop. They have to cut it out. And if you didn't wake up for sahur and drink your water and eat your protein, you're just gonna be thirsty all day.
During the Ramadan season, do they pray throughout the day during the fasting?
Yes, they do regular prayers 5 times a day.
Okay.
For fasting.
Is that more than what they typically do during a normal day?
No, they pray 5 times a day every day, except during Ramadan, you're expected to do more than the 5 times a day. But
Okay.
I don't think that there is a exact number of times you're supposed to pray during Ramadan.
Yeah. Well, we have a family, and the husband is employed at the moment. He's been employed about 3 weeks. So we're working very closely with the employer to make sure that they respect his faith and allow him a place at work to pray. And I just wanted to set the expectation with them on what they can expect during Ramadan, because he may be a little more lethargic throughout the day than he would be typically when they're not in Ramadan.
Right. He probably won't portray that though to an employer. Like I said, he's been doing it his whole life. So he will be reserved about his lethargicness, although he feels it. And thank you for doing that. I appreciate you talking to the employer about him being able to have a place to pray. He might have felt apprehensive about asking for that for himself. So that's a great advocacy that you did. What are they not allowed to eat? They're not allowed to have pork products, any pork products. That includes gelatin. So don't give those kids marshmallows or gummy bears.
Or even capsules, pills, medication that comes in a capsule form, I have learned, because the gelatin that the capsule is in is made with some pig product.
That's right. So just if you're going to give them something and it might have gelatin or other types of pig product in it, just read the label. And if it says gelatin, don't give it to them. Even though that gelatin could technically be tapioca, right? But it doesn't usually specify what kind of gelatin it is. And then no alcohol. They don't drink alcohol, and that includes stuff like almond and vanilla extract.
And in our family, the children do not participate in the fast up until it's only the much older children, the high schoolers and the parents.
Yeah, that's typical. Usually around the age of puberty or a little bit before is when they'll start doing a half-day fast, but not a full-day fast. Oh, unfortunately, I can't hear you, Carol. I think there's something wrong with your audio. Maybe type it in the chat. What happens when you visit during Ramadan no tea? Like during the day, you mean? Yeah, don't offer them anything to drink or eat during the day. Um, and if you come over at night, if you're there at night for whatever reason, I would bring some sort of food gift with you. But of course you don't have to. But yeah, don't offer them any food or drink during the day. And then how long does it take to pray? Oh, I don't know. It depends. I guess 5 minutes. I don't really know the prayer myself. I never learned the full script to it, but 5 minutes. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Well, I certainly appreciate everyone doing the work that they're doing and the discernment that they're doing and walking with their families equitably. What color flowers are appropriate? Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. I'm not sure there is an appropriate color, but I don't know. I can't say that with certainty. But that'd be nice. Nice gift flowers. Um, but yeah, I do appreciate that you guys are walking on this journey with your family and being intentional about learning more about what they're doing and in context of what we do as Christians and living into our faith. And so we're going to talk more about that next week, is our own faith and how to live into it while doing this work, while doing this interfaith work. Where flowers are the gifts? I don't know. I think the gift stuff is really more cultural than it is Islamic. So it may be, I don't have as much experience with Afghanistan as I do with the Middle East. So I don't know. That's just that's a question you can ask the mom. I'm sure she would be happy to talk to you about flowers and gifts and stuff, but I don't know. Be appropriate to host a dinner on April 1st before the end of Ramadan. No, that's a really good thought, but my guess is that they're going to be busy preparing, and that they'll find that to be a distraction. I don't know. It depends on your family. If you feel right about doing that, sure. But you can also offer a dinner during Ramadan, just as long as it's at exactly 7:12 p.m. or whenever it is that sunset is. Okay. All right. Well, if there's nothing more, I will see you all next week for Lent and Ramadan in practice with Reverend Mark Pettis. Have a good night, everybody.